All right. Testing. This is the nameless protagonist. Go ahead and give me a 1 in the chat if you guys can hear me right now. Os. Okay. Don't know if you guys can see the topic for today, but this is going to serve as a bit of a state of the space kind of conversation today. I know we've got a lot of folks simulcasting right now, but we'll go ahead and do this for the live right now and have some of this ready for the playback in the future. Let me get one thing in order and we'll get started. In the meantime, I can do a few acknowledgments, though, of folks that are here. Let's see, we got Artist and MC that came in already. Os. Ron, peace to you, fam. Os. BGS Ibmore, glad you can make it, sir. Os. Toy is here. We got VJ. Yeah, I'll probably just need to do a whole video on Os as a concept. I've talked about it on a lot of different live streams, including some others I've done before. But Toya said it in a way that can sum it up in a few words. You know, it literally translates to this word push. But there are a lot of different particle words that can go along with it and metaphors that have been borrowed for martial arts application. But I like using it in the space for what it represents as a way of encouraging and acknowledging simultaneously, and an understanding that I see you, I recognize you, and I encourage you. Os no segon, to endure, to push through, to overcome adversity. It can be emphasized in a word. Os. I think it's some good language for the space. I've been using it for a while, and hopefully it keeps catching on. You guys share that term. And if you get time, you can always go and Google the term. There's a lot more information on it. And there's a little bit of a taboo amongst folks in the martial arts community, but I think it definitely fits our purposes here. But if we give folks a few more minutes, we'll go ahead and get started with topic number 1, which, it's been covered in the space quite often. There's going to be a lot of overlap here, but I definitely want to emphasize a few things with regards to what his passing really means and has meant for this space going forward. Really, it's meant this for a very long time now. But I think there's a lot of confirmation that's taken place now that that vacuum has been created. Now that that cat has been let out the bag. There's no putting the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube. That's out. Shango Zulu, I see you, fam. Os. Okay, I think I'm set now. So, to the dojo. Glad you guys could make it in today. This is the nameless protagonist. I'm going to be starting with a little bit of a summit, the Hidden Village. That's what I call you guys. Appreciate your presence here. If you guys haven't known or don't know for whatever reason, maybe it's for the folks on the playback who may not know, As of yesterday, it was confirmed that Kevin Samuels passed away. The conditions under which he passed away aren't clear. There's some speculation that you can definitely read into on a Google search. But irrespective of that fact, he's no longer here and won't be making content, obviously. And it's elicited quite an interesting response from the Ado social complex and people overall. I think many people were probably immediately alarmed to not just see the posturing that was angled at Kevin Samuels, but the vitriol at which his passing was spoken about, as though he were some kind of object that just broke and was made of poor quality. And so it could be degraded. There was loss of human life, and the way that he was talked about was as though somebody had dropped a piece of meat on the floor and threw it in the trash. If the pronouns were switched around, there would be a name for that, and it would be classified as hate. And I think we see the hypocrisy in seeing that an individual that speaks the reality of what can be proven and observed in front of everybody's faces, an individual who is serving as a messenger, somehow is classified as being hateful. It's frustrating, and it sets the tone of the reality that we find ourselves in currently. Whether we intended for this to happen or not, with Kevin Samuel passing and with his association with the space has officially become political. Why do I say that? Because the gynocracy has risen to power quite some time ago. And the entire narrative of this sphere is anti-gynocratic. And by virtue of being anti-gynocratic, that instantly places us in the line of fire. We've seen the intersectional feminists make their way into the space and do their intel ops and try to dox people and throw folks under the bus and change the algorithm to try to get our names reclassified and being associated with hate groups. That's been put on maximum right now with the passing of Kevin Samuels. In one sense, the mission was achieved in getting the message out. But now that the message is out, there's a maintenance cost to that. If we don't maintain a full awareness of what it means to traverse this space and to have a general narrative and predisposition that goes against the intersectional grain, if you're not armed with the ability to articulate your point, your stance, and the ability to defend it without being affiliated with terrorism, which is what that really is boiling down to, the way they're trying to frame us, then you may find yourself a political casualty. You may find that it can affect your job, it can affect your relationships, it can affect your opportunities financially moving in different directions. That's the influence that a lot of these intersectionalists have at this point. That's the momentum that's carried. That's the anger and vitriol that's reflected in somebody simply telling what the truth is. What he left behind is a repository of combat data. Combat that took place on those panels he's hosted with these willing volunteers offering perspective after shifted perspective of what the gynocracy truly thinks and its aspirations to attain its final form in the form of a hive. I've said it before on a couple channels that I really do think that the ultimate showdown that's really being talked about is the conflict between what is going to win out in the advent of the fourth industrial revolution. The nuclear family model or the new hive model that's being put forward, and the process that is producing that end result in the form of disgendering of society by virtue of removing the roles with regards to gender, and the continued assault on masculinity that has taken place on a subconscious level ever since the first industrial revolution. I talked about this in Sword Form 2, where I broke down the relationship between civilization, technology, and culture, and how the superposition between the two creates the environment. In the absence of reacting to the technological changes that have transpired by virtue of industrialism, the culture has failed to keep up with these changes, and as a result, the environment has warped and distorted in such a way that it is no longer compatible with the way human beings have been raised. And the pace that it's changing is escalating faster and faster and faster and faster. And when you can take somebody that offers an older point of reference, a way or a map that shows you how to get the results you're looking for in the context of a nuclear family model, when that comes under attack, all you can do is make the decision to try to defend that or let it go. I would posit that the majority of the issues that many people talk about with regards to the gender conversation within this space are rooted in a fundamental question. Are you going to defend and maintain the nuclear family model, or are you going to pursue an alternative model? Yes or no? And I think the expectation of what people want out of these family arrangements, they only happen with a nuclear family model, at least for the masses. And it requires a community to support that. You can't plant a watermelon seed and expect to get apples from it. And as a result of that, I think there's this cultural fallout that was highlighted very clearly on a lot of the content Kevin Samuels put forward, irrespective of what people felt about it. With that said, I think it's a positive thing also that this has served as a kind of litmus test. Whether or not individuals can take the time out to recognize the humanity of that human being. Because in a lot of ways, he represents the situation that many men in the Ado social complex find themselves in by virtue of having a Y chromosome. That fundamentally, you're not seen as a person, but as this living commodity that's supposed to have a responsibility, but you're not given the authority to make that happen. You're a non-person person, a kind of property. Which leads me to the second point that I was going to cover with this topic today. I'll get to that in a little bit, but I really want to highlight how paying attention to people's responses to his death has really shown who a lot of people are. A lot of people in the space that had a lot of conflict with him took the time to acknowledge his passing and express their concern and sorry for his loss and his immediate family that were directly affected by it. Because at the end of the day, he's still human. People who have had whole content streams talking about him, shouted him out, highlighted the positives that he was able to do. Because whether people liked it or not, he served as a facing of the space. He may not have been the one everybody selected, but he was out there in the front line. And it will be for a very long time that content that was produced as a result of that. It will serve as a positive, as a repository of information that you can tap into and get examples of this dysfunction that we're talking about and how to defend against it. And more importantly, to figure out where you stand with regards to whether or not you're going to accept that. Ultimately, you're going to have to ask the question, do you support the nuclear family model or do you not? And if you don't support the nuclear family model, what comes with it is going to be this alternative of roles that at this point and in this environment, most likely will not offer you the role you're looking for, unless you're interested in being a drone, i.e. a sperm donor. That's pretty much about it. I think Dr. T. Johnson sums it up very well with this term ConcuSurf. If you want to know more about that, I highly advise you guys go take a look at Dr. T. Johnson's content. Definitely go on YouTube and just search that up, Dr. T. Hassan Johnson. And really just close your eyes and spin the wheel, pick a podcast and just dive in. Every episode is full of very relevant information. And he's working towards doing something I think is very important, which I'll be covering in this stream today. Identifying ourselves as our own demographic. I think that is profoundly important. Profoundly important. And it's been our absence of not having that, which has been the issue. That blackness that we experience, I think was Dr. Tommy Curry in his book, The Man Not, helped really highlight some of that. The situation with Ice Cube, and dealing with Vivica Fox and the gynocratic representatives there on that podcast. It was very frustrating watching them sit there and say that they weren't black people. But they weren't telling you something that you already didn't understand on an intrinsic deep level anyway. You don't see your name listed when it comes to the government programs. You're not listed when it comes to any kind of metric that involves actually attaining some sort of power or resource. It's always in the context of being some form of liability or something that needs to be controlled. It's frustrating, especially when you highlight that many times. Just making that statement and acknowledging that gets reclassified as you complaining somehow, which to me highlights a pattern that for you who are in the adosocial complex, if you bear a Y chromosome, that Y chromosome is a branding of ownership. And as far as the culture is concerned, you are ultimately property. And I think that's something that we struggle mightily with, trying to address and liberate ourselves from. Because for as much as we want to help and want to serve, we literally get both hands tied behind our backs. Because to take responsibility, you must have that authority. And authority is something that has to be volunteered, animated in the spirit of trust. That's not something you earn. It's something that's acquired by virtue of your position, by virtue of the role you're supposed to assume. If you're a network engineer, it makes no sense that you have to hack into your own data frame so you can protect it. And the password gets changed up on you every day. It makes no sense for you to be a security guard and they won't give you a badge to badge in. That's the situation right now. And it has been for a very long time. And people have been making it work. They've been making it work miraculously. Shout out to those brothers who still can. But when this is the baseline culture, there's nothing you can do with that. I don't know how you get the end result of mutual altruism in the absence of trust. But something that needs to be addressed is that mark of sacrifice, that Y chromosome, and how, or rather what, the objective of a sacrifice is, and all of that energy that's created from it. As a transition point from point 1 to point 2, I'd like to simply say that Ultimately, with regards to Kevin Samuels, his death was unfortunate, but he left behind a lot of very useful information that needs to be used and applied in a positive context to serve the goal of the space, because it damn sure is going to be transmuted and used as a weapon against the space. The purpose of a sacrifice is to create energy to achieve an objective. It's getting into a little bit of the occult or esoteric aspect of it. But we've seen these sacrifice rituals all over television. I don't think there's any more group of men that have been sacrificed on live TV more than anybody else and used to transmute and create movements and all kind of other issues, including money, manifested from the damn ether. And we've been the only group of people who haven't taken any of that energy and transmuted it to serve our needs and what we need so that we can better serve the world, especially our immediate families. Take that loss and transmute it into a gain. Because all of that energy he put out there, every piece of it, will be used against you. It's up to you to form a line of defense against that. And you do have a right to self-defense. But before I get to point number 2, I want to make some acknowledgments. Some new folks have kind of walked in since then. I don't think I shouted you out earlier, Johnny Donovan. Us. DMV's in the house again. Appreciate you. Salshik, I see you, family. Us. Bruce Almighty, there we go again. Os. Shango Zulu, got you earlier. Os. Mr. Z, glad you could make it, sir. Os. Urban Nomad. Os. Jay Shine, glad you can make it up here too, family. I see you. Os. Peace. Ansuki TV, I see you, man. Os. Glad you can make it. Donald Wade Carroll, I see you, family. Glad you can make it. Os. Welcome, Charles. Os. Smitty, what's good, family? I see you. It's been a minute. How you been? Let's see. Before I go on, any questions about anything I said so far? Anything you want to add to it? Anything you observed? Any of that before I jump on to the next topic? Roguish Son. Oh, I see you, fam. Out here leveling up. Good stream earlier, family. Oh, and Toya, go ahead and put your information to your new channel out there if you can. Because I know they hit you with that foolishness and tried to block you because you were speaking, again, the reality and all of that. You know how they get anaphylactic reactions to all of that. So if you guys can, go ahead and subscribe to Toya's new channel. They took her old one down, put a strike on it over some nonsense. So she needs to start back up from scratch again. So go ahead if you can, throw that support. Let's see. Got Kareem, not Karen. Wagwan. The gal from the yard. D Wayne, I see you. Salute, fam. Os. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Welcome back, fam. So this next part, you know, it's a little sticky. It's it's presumptuous of me, and I take full accountability for what's said here, and it is my subjective opinion. And I've said it in a couple places before, but I really want to highlight this point because there's a lot of nuance that's associated with this statement that I'm making here. And I talked a little bit about it last night on another live stream. And I think I really want to just kind of flesh this out a bit more. So definitely feel free to ask me some more questions, but I think for the majority of you, it's already going to resonate. Originally, this was going to be a video. It still might, we'll see. And if you're familiar with the Berserk franchise, the character Guts really stood out to me in that whole concept of the brand of sacrifice. It's very interesting because if you look at what that brand of sacrifice looks like, if you take this and you take that and you superimpose them on one another, you get that sign. All you have to do is add a couple extra lines to it at the very top. Just a few. And you get that same mark. But what that X and Y also stands for is a man. Someone that's born male. The whole concept of being a sacrifice to the God hand. The whole concept of struggling against the entire world because you don't accept being that sacrifice. There's a lot of overlap that you can learn in that lesson. When I see what Guts was struggling over to get the acceptance of something that he didn't even know would even accept him when it was all said and done, all over a particular human being, particular person who he tried to follow and ultimately took everything away from him on so many different levels. Interesting how Griffith, that white man, was the object of that black woman's focus, Casca. And how everything Guts did was almost centered almost exclusively around her. That's a conversation I think I'll save for another day. But it was in the spirit of observing that story and really seeing, what he went through and all of these parallels. It just really reminded me of what men in the Edo social complex endure on a baseline level. And oftentimes, our presence here is an accumulation of coping mechanisms, not because of that, but in spite of that. There's so many things that we operate on that we go without, that other people have on a baseline thing for granted. Let me cover this with the little lead-in I was going to use for the video. I'll just go ahead and read it verbatim here. This was going to be the intro. For those of the Edo social complex, you have no name, only a label. You have no family, only those you're related to. You have no culture, only behavioral presuppositions inspired by reactions. You have no nationality. Rather, you have no tribe, only a nationality. And you have no power, only force. Yours is a path of true freedom. And paradoxically, slavery. Unbound by some things, you are free to determine them all for your own, as your Y chromosome is a brand of sacrifice. As such, defy those who see you as property and take your place as the grandfather of humanity, as it is you alone who may truly don that mantle in all earnesty. What I meant by that was really covered in one of the older videos I did when I talked about the Library of Babel. And I spoke about how long it must have taken to acquire the kind of knowledge to piece something together that took a random occurrence to acquire. The collaborative effort of millions of people to piece together a unique identity that's formed in a culture, and how just in a matter of less than 100 years, that can be erased by a baby farm. Forced domestication of a group of people to completely erase who they were. The blank slate that you're left with. And how that dooms you to just recreate what it is you had from where you came from. That whole video was really speaking to how we've learned to cope and adapt in a world where human beings fundamentally use culture as a means of interfacing with reality, and how all we've been left with are coping mechanisms and behavioral predispositions. And the more you learn about what actually happened on that plantation, and the more you learn about how this culture, this idea of being American, how this word American hasn't even been fleshed out yet. And they're just purely going off the fumes that have been created in this spark of industrialism. How we don't really have a tribe. We just got people we're related to. The missing ingredient is that trust, that mutual investment point, that matter of teaching you what your role is, that pattern of providing for you a purpose intrinsically out the gate without having to ask for it. And I don't mean a designated purpose that you're marked for like a sacrifice is. Yeah, you're given that. But there's people to this day whose names are related to what their intentions are in life. The names they're given, the stars they were born under, elders that have looked this up and stated, this is what he'd be good for, this is what she'd be good for, this is the purpose, this is the path that will set them on. This is their strengths and weaknesses, this is how they've been cultivated, this is what will prepare them for. That true investment in your well-being, animated in a trust that if they show you good intention and do well by you, you will ultimately do well by them. That's something you can't have in scarcity. That's something that goes missing when you look at our history under a lens. I think we tried to create that. I think there's a point in time where we came very close, and we'll talk about that a little later. But as it pertains to individuals with the Y chromosome, there is a baseline fear of you ever acquiring power. And you're only ever permitted force. Why? Because that's something only really an individual uses. I didn't get to talk about this as much as I wanted to. The difference between one man with 10 versus 10 men with one. But in almost all instances, you can see the difference between force and power is dramatic, because force is additive. You can remove force with subtraction. Power is multiplicative. The only way you can address power is with division. As an individual, you can use force and you can get things done with proper timing. That's the way of force. With power, you get things done not just with timing, but in the nature of cycles. To take advantage of the ebb and flow of cycles, you have to have groups of people that are on the same page, that are willing to operate together and function for a unanimous goal. For us, even when you put us together, we don't function as a group. We function as individuals that have been assigned an amalgamation. It's like the difference between having an appendage that's yours and one that's grafted to you. We're kind of like a grafted social complex. That's why I use that term social complex, because I think that accurately describes the phenomenon of what it is we're experiencing. I think that describes the phenomenon of what we are. And what's really profound about that is that in light of all of this, we still somehow function. I think lesser people would have been wiped out by now. The fact that we are so strong that on an individual level we can function still really speaks about to who we are. But it also is really our greatest weakness as a whole. It's really what keeps us from being able to ever really tap into power. It's really one of the prerequisites that's required for a true culture rather than a pseudo culture. You must have a altruistic mutual investment in the person next to you. You must share in stakes. If you don't see their struggle as your struggle, you're not going to make it. If you don't see how them falling hurts you, you're not going to make it. You may be able to maintain, you can tread water if you are an individual that has acquired your power either through appealing to others who have it or through the sacrifice of others, which is profoundly common, very common. You can go back to the continent and find that problem. But it's definitely an issue for those folks that are in the Caribbean and know what I'm talking about with regards to, I'll just call it the spiritual community. It's a very old pattern. Those are the only ways you really get power like that. You appeal for it or you seize it. But the only way you truly get power in the first place is you have individuals that aggregate with you and have a vested interest in the stakes that are at hand. I think that is probably one of the greatest gifts this space can offer you who must struggle. Going back to the whole concept of Guts in that series Berserk. For a long time, he was alone by himself with nothing, just his principles and a damn sword. And making this work is a testament to who we are as people. But even he had to learn the value in working with others. I don't know if you guys are going to continue to watch that series. I highly advise you do. While that may be a mild spoiler, I think it's probably one of the most important lessons ultimately learned. He understood that he couldn't do everything. And when he got the opportunity to truly work with people he trusted, the things he was able to accomplish became not additive, but multiplicative. Ultimately, it is of my subjective opinion that one man with 10 is inferior to 10 men with one. If we can ever understand that principle, I think the things that we can get done and achieve would shock the planet. And the timing for that is perfect right now. Because with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, everything is about to change. Because you are an individual that literally has no, in the traditional sense, culture. You have no ties. You have nothing that truly binds you here. You have empty hands. Again, it's with those empty hands that you can literally grab onto everything. When you have lost everything, it becomes proportionate to everything that you can gain. There is nobody else on earth that can really say that. It is one of the most binding or hindering and liberating facts all at the same time. I'm going to address some of those other points, getting into the next the next statement, especially with regards to the advent of the fourth industrial wave. In the future, I'm going to really get into this point a lot more. This understanding of what having that brand of sacrifice means, what it means to have that Y chromosome. Because it needs to serve as a foundation of emancipation. I don't think you can get the initiation into being a man that you need, into participating in the global conversation without having that ritual of emancipation first. I've said it before, rituals that you don't take conscious control over will take subconscious control instead. What we have lacked is a ritual of emancipation from that plantation. We haven't let it go yet. We still are observing the world from the lens that America's provided for us. And I really don't blame anybody here. It's just the way things have been. The United States has had an interesting development in that it's been allowed to function like an eggshell. It's been isolated from all the rest of the world as a superpower. And it's got to graft on and have a population serve as its energy source to propel it in ways that other groups of people had to take centuries to develop culture to deal with and cope with. I would make the argument once again that even Americans don't know what the hell an American is. They know what the word is. They can point to it on an identification card somewhere. But Americans don't know actual nationalism because they're not a nation yet. Hasn't been enough time. The issues that need to be addressed to truly form a national identity haven't been fought yet. Civil War wasn't enough. That wasn't even over really what a nation is. That was over finance. That's an assigned classification. Sure, people have that. But they don't know what a nation is compared to a place like China, compared to Germany, compared to any other location on Earth where you can point to literally centuries worth of conflict, worth of having one class over another, worth of border disputes, worth of everything that you can find that helps a people identify who they are. That has not happened here yet. There's not been enough time. This country became a corporation before it became a nation. Everybody else was a nation first before they became a corporation, without exception, including people in the third world right this second, because even they got to be a nation first. Even they have a national identity. They understand how power works as a result of that. They can participate in the idea of a nation state. Here we're just a bunch of individuals capitalizing on each other. We just so happen to be ahead of the curve and learn how to capitalize on everybody else on Earth as well. But the world, due to technology, has begun to get smaller. And everybody else has begun to catch up. And their ability to lean on their experience is beginning to play a role. It's kind of like what you see in something like DBZ or any kind of RPG. You can outlevel people. And if you outlevel them, get yourself on a higher tier of power, yeah, they can't really confront you. But what happens when they catch up in level? All of a sudden, it boils back down to skill. If you take someone that's of a lower power level, you match them on an even playing field, person with the most experience almost 9 times out of 10 wins. Our experience as a nation is so lackluster. It shows in every way possible. It's why I make the contention that this is going to be an issue that the American identity is going to struggle with mightily for the next century. Mightily. And the way it deals with it is going to make or break it as a nation. But for you who are of the adosocial complex, especially if you have a Y chromosome, you're not necessarily tied to here because your story didn't just start here. There's more to you than just having been a descendant of that industrial organization known as the plantation. You were something before that. That Y chromosome you have, that mark of sacrifice, stands as one of the oldest existing Y chromosomes on planet Earth. You are literally following in the trace of millions of human beings who came before you, millions, possibly trillions at this point, who were the first to walk among the earth to call themselves Homo sapien sapien. You're the original blueprint, the literal original man. You carry that with you. That makes you the grandfather of human beings. To think that you need to be restricted to the continental US is absolutely ridiculous in a world that's shrinking every single day. You have a place in the national narrative. You have a place. And it's unfortunate that too many have not taken the time to really consider that position, to really consider that posturing. What place you serve in the collective narrative of human beings. Because in the wake of the fourth industrial complex, that's about to be the next biggest question that's not talked about. What does it mean to even be human in the first place? Because as children get brought up on cybernetic implants, artificial intelligence that is serving as their interface with communication, getting implants that allow them to connect neurologically to the internet, being able to have parents decide what genetic modifications that they'll be born with so that they can garner some type of advantage so that they can compete on the global scale. The kind of laws that were being talked about in the 1950s and 60s are going to be applied to individuals questioning how many implants can you get until you're no longer classified as human, and should you get the same rights being automatically augmented or artificially augmented versus somebody who's not. These are real questions that people are going to have to decide very quickly. And since people recreate what it is they have from where they came from, what point of reference are they going to use to draw a conclusion from? Everything you saw with civil rights, everything you're seeing going on now with the alphabet conversation. Starting with the gender, or rather what I call the disgendering phase. There's about to be a global conversation on what it means to be human. And I think this is an excellent opportunity to put yourself front and center so that you can take advantage of that and make moves and get involved in spheres that otherwise you may have never considered you could be a part of. Because I think deep down, ultimately, all most of you want to do is create value for yourselves and other people around you. And there are ways to make that happen. There are resources we have available now that don't require institutions to get into in order to gain access to. For right now, at least, they're free and available. YouTube is one. You can train up, skill up, and tool up. There are people in this space who are subject matter experts in a wide variety of subjects. I advise you seek them out and listen. This is how you build that mutual trust and mutual interest. Whether or not you realize it or not, being in this space right here, being in this position that you're in, having a minority opinion in the face of the gynocracy, there's some stakes that we all share by not having that opinion of wanting to serve the queen hive. You can start there. There's literally nothing stopping you. And I think for a lot of us, we're already doing that. But I want to draw more attention to that to really emphasize how much you can do with what you have available now. I kind of touched on this third point But I want to really dig into this third point a bit more about the relationship that the fourth industrial complex is having and the situation we find ourselves in as ADOS Black men versus the position that Black men found themselves during the Reconstruction era, or rather, just before it kicked off. Because there are a lot of parallels that we can take advantage of. Before I jump into that, let me go ahead and do some acknowledgments to some folks that have jumped in since last time. See, we got, is that Fitness Mom? What's going on with you? Glad you can make it. Let's see. We got Ish Dolo. Os. Glad you can make it, fam. See, the truth is I know it. Glad to see you here, family. Os. It says, when you understand that race and racism is the exact same thing, is when it becomes clear why well-intended people in our tribe end up doing so much harm to one another. Unfortunately, family. Unfortunately. You know, it's like I said, black is the shadow of white. And as much as the shadow may want to, it can't affect the thing that's casting it. Unfortunately. Yeah, roguish. Gonna have to let me put some bold thugs on when this is over. Let's see, we got he says if y'all Mrs. Z says if y'all want to know how crazy this is, Nameless has 30 watching. Ches Charde has 170, Green Gorilla 500, Paris 5K. All talking about Kevin Samuels, but Paris is ripping him. I mean, it's true, man. I mean, there's going to be a target placed on the backs of anybody that's associated with this space. There always has been, but there's a lot of very specific verbiage that's being used. More specifically, they think that masculinity can be segmented and offered in these slivers that are quote approved. It's how you get these terms like toxic masculinity and, you know, approved positive masculinity, all of these other things. Masculinity is not something that's defined by women. And all that is just nothing more than offering a carrot on a stick to the individuals that are going to be placed on drone status and those who are effectively going to be sacrificed as fodder for either being an ATM or a sperm donor. Conditioning men to behave in a way that's going to acquiesce to the expectations of the hive. But when I cover the hive in more detail, I'm going to really touch on this topic about there's no such thing as male worker bees. No such thing. And we'll really start really cutting into that because I think we really need to start inoculating ourselves against a lot of these issues that are being leveled against the space. A lot of these sub, I don't want to call them microaggressions, but it's really just linguistic manipulation of these terms to force compliance in a way that travels right under the radar. We need to really keep a heads up for it. I think being in the space long enough helps you, but as an individual in the position that you're in, you're going to find yourself very quickly finding yourself in a position of leadership wherever you find yourself in life. Meaning you're going to have to learn how to teach other people these things. And it's not about trying to force them. Oftentimes, it's being able to articulate your stance and demonstrate why. And if you can identify when the subtle manipulation is going on in the background, that can help you enlighten others that are in your immediate sphere of influence. Because this is going worldwide. The gynocracy is going global, and it already has. And I think it's very critical to learn those key points because you don't need the sledgehammer to put the tack into the wall. You just need proper leverage and to make sure the surface that you're applying it on is applicable for thumbtack. Once you can learn the proper manipulation of force, force has its use. Again, the way you use force is with timing. Timing. That's effective use of force. But to do that, you have to have a clear understanding of the field around you. Getting into those nuances gets you there. Got Vernon King. Oh yeah, how guts. Yeah, his team is classic RPG tastic. I really appreciated it, and it's interesting. His well, I won't drop any more spoilers, but you know, it's not even a matter of greater than or lesser than. Everybody in his team contributes to a point where they're greater than the sums of their parts, meaning because they're working together, they can get more done than just them as individuals being added together. I think that's a very important lesson to learn. Some of us learn this in sports, but that's the foundation for culture. Real talk, that's how human beings navigated really nature. That's the way we're designed. Our neurology is we have a predisposition for that, neurologically speaking, to function that way. And it's unfortunate how modern, really the industrial revolution has really helped. The word I want to use is hinder it. I won't use the other word I was going to use. It's really nullified the effects of that and left people very atrophied in being able to recognize the value in that because of this fear-based scarcity that believes that position over others is leadership, when it's probably the lowest form of leadership you can express. And that demonstrating a mutual interest in those that are around you gets you so much more done than anything else. You'd be shocked. Again, with empty hands, you can acquire everything. See, Veiled Seeker. Yep. There's a lot to say about that potential, fam. I'm glad you can make it here. Os. The Rocket King. Shout out to you, fam. Os. An NBA fan. Glad to see you back, fam. And Mr. Collar. Os. One of the Black Ronin are here. I guess my Streamlabs is lagging a little bit, so it doesn't show your post just yet. But I'm glad you can make it, fam. Definitely should catch the playback on some of the stuff we were talking about. I think it'll vibe with you. Os. Yeah, especially what you guys are doing out there with the Black Ronins, that initiative. Man, I got to chop it up with you guys in the near future, man. We still got to do that interview. There's a lot I've been meaning to talk about with you guys. You and Shinobi. Kirigakure. Welcome back, AB. But if you guys don't have any more questions, I'll jump into this last little segment before we start wrapping things up. But I think it's interesting seeing the similarities that have taken place with what's gone on during the Reconstruction era and what's happening now with the Fourth Industrial Revolution. I highlight the Reconstruction era for a major reason, because it's probably one of the least covered sections in this country's history, and was probably, and I said this once before, it's probably the only point in this country's history where there was an actual Black patriarchy. I don't think there has ever been any other time in US history where by default there was a existing Black patriarchy than from that tiny window, that tiny generation and a half from 1860, when Black men started joining the Union Army, and the advent of the Jim Crow era. think that was the only period in our history where we had that. And the knee-jerk reaction that caused from the entire country was so profound. That spawned the birth of the military hand of white supremacy. It sparked so many political movements, not limiting, but including feminism. That first wave, as we understand it, purely because Black men were going to get the right to vote before women did, specifically white women. I don't think the weight behind that is heavy enough on how much that changed the whole way the world looked at us. Really, the country looked at us. I don't think we appreciate the kind of things we got done just because we were left alone. Just because we had an opportunity to just do what we've wanted to do all along, which is do right by our families and contribute value to our community. That's it. When you ask the average one of us in the ADO social complex what we ultimately want, we just want to see other folks win. We want to share that victory with them. We're not trying to see people suffer for no damn reason. Probably one of the biggest reasons why we support underdogs left and right. One of the biggest reasons why we're probably some of the biggest givers, even though we can't afford to do it. We pay for it financially. We pay for it emotionally. We pay for it in everywhere you can have a currency. We just want to see folks do good, usually at our expense. And we learn that at an early age, a very early age. And there's very few who make it in the ADO social complex, with and without a Y chromosome, that don't get burned by the fact that they were giving and gave with no intention on getting anything back in the first place. It's almost as though there's some odd ritual of initiation to where that part of you has to die in order to be called an adult. I think that's what gets classified as adulthood. Killing that altruism that you have within you. And then hypocritically go to church and get taught to give all over again. The psychology behind this loop is insane. Absolutely insane. To kill the part of you that's required to have a community, but then pretend as though it's been brought back to life, as though necromancy were used. It's like our idea given is on some Walking Dead iteration of it all. And so the concept is just utterly and completely tainted. I'm digressing though. What made the Reconstruction era so interesting is the fact that the reason why it's probably the only location we had a true patriarchy is because women were just simply not allowed to join the military. They just simply weren't. And because they weren't allowed to join the military, culturally, by default, men were just simply in the role of being in charge. And you'll see that from this breed of men, former Union soldiers, individuals that have worked with those Union soldiers that were generation one off the plantation, with the assistance of the federal government at the time to provide a measure of safety on the outskirt, a perimeter, if you will, to make sure the whole country doesn't come descending. You have some of the most powerful institutions the ADO social complex has ever made, starting from the nuggets and the seeds planted by those individuals. I think one of the biggest individuals that stands out from here is likely Booker T. And if you have not read that book, Up from Slavery, please do. If you pay attention to Marcus Garvey and you get his book, The Thoughts and Opinions on Marcus Garvey, you break down what he was saying in 1905, 1906, a lot of the inspiration behind what he was talking about came from Booker T. You have folks all the way back then in the late 1800s talking about industry and science being the way we move forward. That should sound familiar. At this point in time, countries were becoming more and more industrial. This new idea of modern industrial nationalism was catching on. In Japan, it was the Meiji era. They were becoming an industrial power in and of themselves. I'm going to do a separate video on that one day, very, very soon, to really break down the process that a country goes through to industrialize. Because I think what they went through then is useful for what we need to do now. And it's exactly what was going on during this time period during Reconstruction. When you have Black people putting together whole industries, able to compete with everyone globally, especially on the local level, with literally nothing but a couple sets of instructions and some plans and the ability to trade. That open space from the plantation, that immediate emancipation to go out and terraform the land how you need to suit what it is your goal is. That's that entrepreneur spirit that allowed for a Tuskegee Institute to happen. It allowed for a Tulsa, Oklahoma to be built in the first place. It allowed for a Rosewood to be built in the first place. It allowed for the myriad maroon communities all over the United States at the time to get its institutions rooted, started, and put together. I highly suggest, if you get time, please go back and look at the Reconstruction era and pay attention to the businesses and the foundations that were laid from those institutions at that time. Because it can serve as a blueprint to help you right now in this fourth industrial wave that's happening currently. Because just like there was emancipation to all of this free land, and I'm putting free in quotes, but relative to where they were, there was freedom now with regards to that. We're in a similar position where the internet and the extension of the social environment onto the internet has made the world shrink. You have access to data, you have access to social networks that you probably would have never had the opportunity to 20, 30 years ago. Purely because you can join a social media group and now you can collaborate with folks that are thousands upon thousands of miles away. Case in point, looking at what we're doing right this second talking. The amount of background that all of us have right now, just in this one room, is so diverse. Having something like this 20 years ago would be kind of difficult to imagine. We can do that now. There's so many businesses that can be put together now by virtue of just having a communication, having a demographic that you can tap into from here online that can extend to your immediate network wherever you're living at. It means not only can you do that work here, you can go abroad and do the same thing. And with the way the currency is set up, you can take the currency you earn in these US dollars and flip them harder somewhere else. There are educational opportunities that are available. Just go on things like Khan Academy, taking advantage of programs that are on Amazon. You can go to Kindle. You can go to Audible and get various books on subjects that can get you certifications that prepare you to get involved in so many different things that prior to this, you would have needed an apprenticeship with somebody or something, or you would have needed a degree from a particular institution to gain access to. Not required now. And that's going to escalate because one of the blind sides of the fourth industrial revolution is the lack of customer service that's about to take place because most of that is going to get automated. There's still going to be a desire to interface with the human being, which means social skills are going to become important. There are venues you can take to prepare yourself for what's to come. And it is very similar to what you're going to find yourself with in the very near future. I think taking an approach mentally, following up that physically will help align you spiritually. That's a little bit of a precursor to the nameless path, the concept that I'm going to continue to push on a lot more of my social media content. So definitely look forward to those videos where I really get into preparing yourself on each of those levels to detox from a lot of the problems that affect us as a group and as a demographic in particular. This is a slight digression, getting into the conversation of emancipation before initiation. But I think it warrants a bit of a sidebar. Medically speaking, we suffer disproportionately from a lot of issues that have been brought about due to the Industrial Revolution and the commercialization of the healthcare system. I think because there aren't resources set aside to study our unique needs medically, the only response we have are taking measures of prevention to ensure that we're doing well. If we don't take an extra step to observe what's going on with us mentally and physically, we can't take advantage of making those moves in a broad context. I think we see too many of us die needlessly over things that could have been prevented from simple lifestyle changes. A lot of people will attribute it to various coping mechanisms that have been adopted to deal with whatever environment they find themselves in. Fair enough. But nobody's coming to save us. And if many of our leading causes of death begin and end with what we're feeding ourselves, I think part of that ritual of initiation, and part of that ritual of emancipation really, needs to be and take an initiative for your mental, physical, and spiritual health. Because these are things that were normally provided for you by the culture. But pie in the sky and leave it to Jesus isn't going to fix that. We're going to have to take accountability for what the Industrial Revolution has done to affect those baseline things that are required by a human being. Because I'll stand on this statement right here. All human culture can be rooted back to shamanism at the end of the day. Shamanism is the core seed for every piece of human culture you can find. And I don't care where you turn to, the very first people who were involved in that was somebody that got a Y chromosome just like you do. We started this human shit. Case in point. And if we did it once, we could do it again. I know Uwu just got here, and I'll go back and make some acknowledgments in a little bit, but, he's absolutely right. We are citizens of planet Earth. There's no reason why we need to be holding ourselves back to this little bubble at all. We not only have the capability and the means, we really have the right to do it. I'm not saying you need to abandon everything that you have here. What I am saying is you are more than just your conditioning. You are more than just an individual with a Y chromosome marked with a brand of sacrifice. You're more than that. You always have been more than that. I just don't think you've really been shown that before. But you can learn. You can learn. Take initiative for yourself mentally, because the mind is where the body begins. There's no function in the body that happens without the mind playing a role in it, whether it be on a conscious or unconscious level. If you want an illustration of that, go take a look at the yin yang. Go take a look at the yin yang. Show you everything you need to know. That yang, that top light part, that's your thinking. That black underneath part, it's your subconscious. That little black spot that's within that white is the understanding of the cycle and the interplay that happens between the two, where one becomes the other fluidly. If you want a literal example of that, go look at your prefrontal cortex in your brain, then look at your gut. And know that's the yin yang happening just the same. And you shouldn't be surprised to learn that what goes on in your gut plays a role of what happens in your brain. So much so that it's difficult to tell which one has precedence over the other. How much more so than the food that you consume that's going there? The mind controls the mundane world. The body is a part of the natural world. And the soul is a part of the non-physical world. You can call it spiritual if you want to. But I think these are the three dimensions of being human that's required for being human. That culture serves a means by which you can address it. And if you're going to emancipate yourself from this plantation and begin the initiation of self-actualization, you have got to gain administration over these three domains, starting with your mind. Take the time to learn who you are. Take the time to involve yourself in your physical fitness, because the two are mutually receptacle to each other. And from that, develop a philosophy of who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. Figure out where you want to go. You don't have to be a sacrifice. You don't have to try to become a male worker bee. They don't exist anyway. And there's more to life than just being a drone. There's so much more to life than that. Every time there's this really dark, jacked up darkness that's surrounding everything, all that means is the light is just that much brighter. You literally can be that. In the face of all of the black pillness, you can still decide how you respond to it, and nobody can take that away from you. And the more you're aware psychologically, the more your mind is in tune with what's going on, the more you can see the subconscious changes in an environment before it happens, and thus act before your environment. In martial arts, in the swordsmanship technique we study, that is known as mushin, or no mind. That applies to all things in life. The ability to move before the environment. And it ties into this concept of timing we spoke about with the use of force. That is how you as an individual use force. And it's how you as an individual can learn to cultivate with other individuals who've learned to do the same thing. And from there, trust can be made. After you complete that initiation, that shared hardship of growth and transformation becomes the baseline tether that allows for you to build a trust amongst others who have experienced similar hardship. And it's through that shared hardship that you can form a unit. You don't have to think the same thing. You don't have to be carbon copies of each other. In fact, that's the beauty of it all. It's our differences that make us a stronger aggregate. You want people being different. You want that. That is an advantage, because we can look at the same thing and see something totally different. That is freaking brilliant. That's actually what makes human beings human beings. That we can take so many different perspectives, look at something totally different, and then from that transmute something none of us could have done by ourselves. That's the use of power. That's the objective. That's not what we were taught on the plantation. That's not what we're taught in school, not on our own volition. But that's something we can learn now. That's something we can employ now. That's the reason for emancipating yourself from the plantation and initiating yourself into your own manhood. To figure out who you are, why you are, take ownership of that, and unapologetically move forward with it. Continue to provide value for yourself and those you care about, and make sure you have an understanding of what's going on around you so you can execute the proper timing. Learn to be before your environment so you don't live in a chain series of reactions, but instead become the arbiter of the sphere around you. Go ahead and pause for now. do a few more acknowledgments. And if you guys are interested, I can definitely open up the panel and we can chop it up for a hot second. Had a few new people come in. Adult Art Design, I see you, family. Os. D. Scott, welcome back, fam. Os, glad you got in here. And of course, Black Guru Strikes, Kimo Sabe, Ra L, my Scorpio brother. What's good, family? Dead set. It's been a hot second. How you been, fam? Chaos reigns here. Chaos reign. What's good, fam? And Laz Zulu, you missed basically the whole show. You won't have to catch the playback, fam. we cover quite a bit of few topics, but you can peep the description to kind of get a synopsis on what we reviewed and went over. A little bit of a rough outline. But if you guys are interested, I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat. And if you want to join up, you can hop on. Next week, I got to get premium of this so I can add more folks to this and get more features set up. But feel free to drop about any questions or statements, man, you guys have about the conversations. We covered a couple things, but again, today was more of a, getting caught up, touching on some of the current events that have gone down, before we get back into some of the rest of the sword forms. I still need to get into sword form 5, 6, and possibly 7. Those could be some pretty interesting topics. Okay, we got Laz Zulu. All right, fam. Laz Zulu was good. Os.
Hey, what's up? Sorry.
No, you good, fam? What's going on with you?
Okay, I want to get a quick rough draft. I think I have a decent understanding of what the topic was. I just want to get a rough draft. Give me the bullet points.
We spoke about Kevin Samuels passing, paid some respect to him transitioning, and we spoke about how his loss for the space is both a gain and a point of accountability now, because whether or not we wanted him to represent the space or not, he's still classified as a representative. And as with all death, the energy that spawns from that is going to be weaponized against the space. And so it's in our best interest to take that same energy and inertia that he created and use it to further the objective of the space, specifically to empower ourselves and use the example and use the information of the live streams and all the data that was presented there to serve our goals and continue to move further, away from dealing with this gynocratic BS. What's going on, AB? That was the first point. The second point is I broke down really how having a Y chromosome in the adosocial complex really just marks you as being an individual marked for sacrifice, and how you're seen ultimately as property, which is the fundamental issue. And as a result of that, you don't have the same benefits other groups of people have whose cultures are intact. You don't get to run the same script that they can run to problem solve. You have to run a completely different program entirely. And in fact, you need to write a whole new set of coding language to edit the issues and syntax errors that happen with us, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. Means you can't just go get Windows. You got to go and do your own tools. AB, you know all about that headache. It's both a boon, well, it's a bane and a boon, but it all depends on how you look at it, because that means everything you make is unique in your own.
And that's you can create endlessly and make it your own, but at the same time, you got to make it your own, which means you got to make it. So
exactly. So that's the accountability portion that's on us and in the space in general. And I talked about the process that would be required for that, which is an emancipation from the plantation. and how people are following in behavioral patterns that were created during that 400 period year of semi-domestication, and how there needs to be a formal removal of the mindsets that were created in order to begin a true process of initiation to move on beyond that point into something greater. And really what I'm speaking about is our experience with life is bigger than just being from America. We came from somewhere else before we came here. And so having the conversation with regards to our place in human history is far better for us because we're one of the only groups of people who can truly say that. And lastly, I was really tying into, the fourth point, and I was showing the parallels between what was going on during the Emancipation, during Reconstruction, and the similarities that we're facing right now in the present moment with the fourth industrial revolution around the corner, and how fundamentally there was a lot of opportunity that was presented because of our ability to build freely without being hindered. And that was key. Left alone to our own devices, we were productive and we made things. However, we're in a similar position now. I just don't think it's being recognized, where the fourth industrial wave is creating so many opportunities for us to create and link up with different social networks and circles that would have been outside of our reach otherwise, or at least not as easily accessible, to where we can create our own niches and create our own well-being in a way similar to what was happening back then.
True. I've also noticed that too. The amount of opportunities I think I've been able to gain through this, I guess you could say, the fourth industrial system is amazing. I'm literally being in contact with people that I wouldn't, like you said, I would never normally be able to contact with. Well, if I did, it would be years, months that I would take, and I would just have to randomly run into them like on the street somewhere, which is, chances that's happening is kind of almost slim to none.
Yeah, with I started live streaming, participating in live streams about maybe 3 years ago, and it's changed my life. I've talked to people I never thought I would ever talk to in my life. Talked to people across overseas, live in Germany, Italy, Japan.
And that's a good thing. I see the chessboard moving. The thing is, I'm trying to see the chessboard, and that's kind of where I'm I see the chessboard, the grand chessboard, but I think I'm missing the smaller chessboard to a degree. Because I see what the U.S. wants to do, and all and several other nations want to do, but I feel like I don't have a smaller chessboard necessarily for what I think I understand what.
In other words, you see the strategy, but you're trying to understand the tactics.
Basically. Yeah.
So here's the dichotomy that's in play right now. If you take the nuclear family model and you run it side by side with the hive model.
Oh, I kind of said that too. Yeah.
That's what's going on right now. That's the primary question. What is going to last and outlast within the fourth industrial complex? The traditional role or the streamlining of human beings to make them far more automated and artificial so that they match a particular sort of outcome.
What
we got Sigma Jones. We got Sigma Jones that just joined. What's going on, fam?
Thanks for having me. I was kind of just listening in and catching up and all, and your analysis of the fourth revolution and the industrial revolution is very spot on. Like, to me, I think a lot can be learned, especially during that time when Japan pretty much modernized itself in the Meiji era.
Mm-hmm.
Any nation can follow suit with that, no matter what background or what cultural aspects they lack in.
I agree. If you understood how far behind Japan was when they pretty much got forced into that posture, it was insane. Emperor Meiji, to see what happens within the span of 30 years after they're coming out of the Edo period, which was 200 plus years of uninterrupted peace. I don't think there's been any other any other period in a nation's history where they went that long without a formal conflict. It's absolutely insane. And when you get
Mm.
into what the Edo clan actually did to maintain that, it would put COINTELPRO to shame.
I'm thinking that it had to be. I'm guessing because you had to basically just keep all your population in the city, well, in the country,
Yeah,
and that
nobody
means
could move in
basically
or out.
just
Nobody moved in or out or nothing. Like,
exactly. It basically turned into how I would see it, quote unquote, a plantation at that point. But that's my opinion.
but it was different for them because that's
They
how they
wanted to be
got,
there.
well, that's how they got there. They were culturally already appropriated to live that way. So you got to remember, when you've got a group of people who survived in an environment that was prone to volcano eruptions, prone to hurricanes, prone to natural disasters of every kind, famines, inter clan conflicts. You didn't get the casual ability to just be an individual. You had to work
Mm.
as a group to make it through that. And as a result, they were able to actually already be kind of pre-acclimated towards having very tight social circles the way they carry out today. I mean, it wasn't difficult for the Edo family to make that happen, but the population was already primed for that sort of deal. And when you dig into the concepts that are presented in Confucianism, which really emphasizes not just filial piety, in other words, being able to serve your parents and do right by them, but the idea of everybody having their rightful place in society,
Huh.
that class system worked very well to maintain order. It was always something to kind of keep people with regards to that. And what I like about the Edo period in particular, I know I'm digressing slightly, is, and this is definitely something that'd be a good topic for the Black Ronins to cover in the future, is how people reconciled a samurai being in an era of peace, a warrior that's in peacetime. How do you
Mm.
justify your position at that point? In books like Agakure or Hidden Leaves and a lot of other literature that came out, folks like Yagyu Munenori, he did The Life-Giving Sword. This was the time period of Miyamoto Musashi's Gorin no Sho, or the Book of Five Rings. You know, a lot of this content centers around answering that question. And I think a lot of that introspection could be very useful for us now in the present moment, where we find ourselves in this interesting cusp
I'm
of,
about to read those books then and go over those. I mean, if anything that can be any
you can get
information
it
that's
all
good,
on.
that can use good information.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of that stuff is on Amazon, and you can get these books on Kindle. I highly advise definitely taking a look at some of that literature and listening to how people were talking 400, 500 years ago and seeing
Mm-hmm.
how relevant a lot of that stuff is in the present.
As they say, ain't nothing really truly new under the sun. So
I agree.
hmm. I keep learning that as I get a little bit older. I'm like, fuck, that saying is kind of getting real annoying. It's true, but it's still the same. So hmm.
Nothing new under the sun.
Now,
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned having no, you have a wide chromosome in the black community. You have to kind of carve your own path. When I started really doing YouTube, making videos and stuff, I got to the point I actually wrote my own software to help me do it.
really,
Yeah, I wrote my own software to help me do it. I got this program I use. I literally call it the AB Office. I take note. I write out what I want to talk about. I either do my video or live. Then I have my description all typed out, so I don't have to type it out every time. I just copy and paste it. And I usually have my tags and copy and paste it. And I might even write down a comment or something and copy and paste it. And I save it in the format. I close the program. I can open them back up at any time and start where I left off. It automatically
Hmm.
saves for me.
Yeah, man, I need to employ more patience to
I hear
Get
something
involved with
somebody talking about
coding.
this stick
Yeah, I'm trying to get a live coding series together. I already did one. I need to do another one. I call it Dusty Programming.
Well, I mean, if you've got some tutorials you're doing, man, you feel free to drop a link in the chat. I'll definitely take care of that and check that out and share that with folks
Yeah,
that can find
let me
some
get it.
value out of that.
But I'm going through the basics of C sharp. I'm trying to start slow because if I want to, I can give you a headache really quickly, and I don't want to do that. I want I want brothers to digest what I'm trying to tell them. There's
Yeah,
a
you just got to
lot
make
of
sure. You just got to
there's a
make sure
lot of
you can.
moving. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
He says a lot of moving parts.
There's a lot of moving parts in programming. That's any
Yeah,
language you work with.
you just
Go
need to
ahead.
show kind of the practical applications on how people can use it in everyday sort of deals, and working backwards from there. I think people will really latch on when they can see the advantages for it, especially since unfortunately a lot of root programming is kind of being replaced with automation these days. Getting people into practical things that they can code, like web pages and stuff like that, or getting into some of the more basic JavaScript stuff and showing how you can use coding to enhance a lot of the tools that exist already. Things like WordPress, etc., can go a very long way, especially for content creators that may be interested in trying to step their game up. So
Yeah,
relatability,
which is pretty much PHP.
yeah, I mean relatability goes a long way in marketing that, but But a
Mhm.
Sigma, did you have anything you wanted to ask about from some of the
Here's my
topics we
link to
broke
the
down
live
today?
stream.
Oh, but I did have a question.
Yeah, sure. Whoever wants it first, you can go ahead.
No, I'll let him go first because I mean he spoke less.
Oh no, I was just taking in all the information, but I would ask because something you brought up about the Y chromosome being seen as a deterrent. Something that Sensei Takai, that we interviewed him last year, and he talks about how in his family, coming from a samurai, they have this ritual where they will lay out 3 items before a child when it's roughly around a year old, if not two, and whatever item that child picks, that's what they're destined to do. And I find it interesting that even in modern times, a lot of the samurai families still cultivate an idea of whatever path you choose, this is what we're going to help you garner towards. And so for Sensei Takai, the 3 items that were laid out before him was a samurai sword, it was kind of like a Japanese doll, which is in reference to a business person, and then there was like an item for like a family crest. And he said he was always drawn towards the sword, meaning that in the family's eyes, that's what he was destined to become. And I say that because that's one of the things I feel like is lacking when you think of how black boys could be cultivated in today's modern world. We don't give them an opportunity to choose their path. In other words, it's chosen for them. And no matter how much they want to go in a different direction, they're constantly beat down to say you can only do this because you're a black boy, or you can only do this because you're a black man. So that's something I just want to bring up too when you was talking on that.
And I was thinking a lot about that whole entire dynamic. You consider in antiquity the entire samurai class system. That was a development process that took decades, man. It was a whole process. Your mentors, your training, which began at as early as the age of 3 for a lot of individuals. The expectation of following a particular behavioral predisposition, the weight that's placed on even the father, to prepare the children for that. Samurai children were a thing. You know what I'm saying? and it just is more of a reflection of what it meant to be a part of the warrior class in general. You can extend that to any culture. I see
Hmm.
similar patterns from Native Americans, the folks on the continent to this day. This is a very human thing to do. And it's unfortunate because it's as though everybody has this narrative and it begins to disappear all of a sudden when you introduce industrialism. And I think what's interesting about the way Japan did their industrialization process is that they adopted a lot of the warrior class and warrior caste traditions into their industrial model.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of why, on one end, it's their greatest weapon. It's also a sword that cuts both ways, no pun intended.
I was
Double
just about to say that.
double-edged sword, huh?
I was just about to say that. Though I mean Japanese businessmen, like I know them to be very shrewd businessmen, intelligent businessmen, but their flexibility is not there. It's just it's not there.
I think a lot of it is because they adopted a blind copy and paste of the American model, and
Yeah.
they did it under, well, there's two different pressures. Number one, they boosted their imperial model off of what America was doing at the time,
Right.
and
Hmm.
most of it was animated in this idea of manifest destiny. That was the first issue. The second issue was when America finally realized that Japan was an actual rival at the conclusion of World War II. It gutted it a little bit too much in certain areas. And
Mm-hmm.
so what was left were the vestiges of the warrior caste, and it worked until suddenly it didn't in the late 90s when you had that, economic crash. And it was in the spirit of that crash that a lot of what was put forward stopped working, because you can't have that warrior culture. It's actually exactly what led to the Meiji era happening in the first place. You know, you can't have this cast of people that's supposed to operate with a particular goal and job, and then there's no work for them now. You
Mm-hmm.
can't expect the same level of output when you're not getting things back to sustain. And it ends up stressing the entire population. That's the problem Japan's really looking at currently with regards to that double-edged sword cutting. But the concept does work. I mean, if it's in the right environment, they adopted their warrior class into their industrial model. And they
Mm-hmm.
found a measure of success that was pretty unprecedented at the rate at which they accomplished it. And there's a
Yeah,
lot you
one
can
of
do.
the go back in history, say what you want about the Romans, but one of the things I thought they did was very interesting is when they conquered a culture, despite brutally, they let them keep their customs.
I
Yeah.
thought they just took all the information they could. Or was that the U.S. model?
That's it. I think that's the U.S. model, but Romans actually took notes from other cultures
Yeah, that's what I was
and
saying.
kind of adapted it to their own.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Yeah, so that's what he learned that from. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but the important thing is at the end of the day, you have to cultivate that system of manhood and placement within it. That initiation process needs to begin as children. And in the Edo
Hmm.
social complex, you
There is
know,
none.
you're designated very early as a vitamin D dispenser, an ATM, or potentially both. And a
Hmm.
lot of it is at the decision of others who don't have a Y chromosome, which is totally backwards compared to the rest of the way humanity has and does operate. It's a collaborative effort with the elders and the
Yeah,
other men in the warrior class that determine, you know, that initiation process. But domestication's a bitch, man. That's all I can say.
yeah, it is.
But I think that's the
But
value,
things are
and
changing. But I
that's
think
the
things are.
value in right. That's the value in recognizing it now, because being aware of it, that's the precursor to being able to formulate a response,
To
especially an
change it.
effective response. And in particular, what this means is other groups of people understand that dynamic. And I think I brought this up while I was in the chat in one of your shows, Sigma, about how it can be valued from in the Edo social complex that want to engage in the world narrative to begin your own line, to truly begin and establish your own kaimo, your own crest, your own source of origin.
Oh yeah, your own story, of your clan. I already got that concept, so I can understand how that can definitely be useful for men necessarily to help build their self-esteem, knowledge base, and all the information and whatnot. So I understand that. That's a very good concept. I like that necessarily. So I've actually been adapting that slowly, even internally. I guess I've been doing that internally by reading other knowledges in other cultures, but I guess not even just subconsciously. I guess I've been doing it because when I started looking more, I was like, okay, what do I need to plan for myself? All right, eventually I'm gonna die, so I'm just out planning for how do I plan for myself and then my kids, and then when you start kind of like going through that mindset, you pretty much already know. I think that's just a normal function of life, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be?
I wouldn't say it's normal, especially if you're coming from Black America. But I will say in other cultures, little boys are they are guided into their path, and then once they reach a certain age, almost close to adulthood, then it's like, okay, we have guided you where you need to go. Now it's time for you to start making your own path. And by that point, they already have an idea of what they want to do or what they want to become. And they're already hitting the ground pretty much at light year speed compared to black men from Black America, where around that same age, they don't have much clue as to how they want to trailblaze their own path or kind of like make a namesake or crest of their own sake. That's where the disparity's at.
Yeah, I understand because I almost didn't really understand what I wanted to do with my life until I was like 25. I'm 30 now, and I was like, I was just kind of just going through the motion. And I was like, okay, what do I really want to need to do instead of creating, all this stuff? And I was like, when I finally got more of an opportunity to think and how I wanted to process and how I wanted to live my life and do what I wanted to do and what I wanted to create and live for myself and legacies that I want to live for my not only myself but the people that I guess I wanted to leave it to. Then I started focusing on different things, but that was almost 25. I had already had, you know what I mean. That's almost a different. That's like how much time did I waste? From 20 to the 25. That's like so much time and effort that was wasted. That could have been used to at that point in time, like sharpening myself or reforming myself. So I understand the concept. It's just so much time is lost in the Eidos. I don't say I guess in the Eidos tribe. I guess you can call it. So much time is lost. It's just.
I feel you, brother, but you need time to learn too.
True,
Right,
I understand that. But
which is why, at the end of the day, I think it's unfortunate that there's so much, like you said, loss with regards to seeing that we're succeeding not because of, but in spite of these circumstances.
Yeah, despite of it. Yeah.
And as a result, there's no mutual trust that can be cultivated within the Edo social complex. And so the things that you need, the social currency you need to actually acquire power is just utterly missing. You can't expect people who have had to succeed as an individual to suddenly participate in power. It's just not there. You're multiplying by zero, literally. And I think it contributes to a lot of the landscape we have. Go ahead, Zulu.
I thought you were going to be multiplied by one, honestly, because it's just one man, one sound almost. That's how I kind of look at it. It's just one man, one sound.
That's what I'm talking about. You take the individual, and yes, they are multiplying by one, and that's force, right? But if that individual is expected to act as though there is power there to do something you can solve with power, that's when the multiplying by zero occurs. And your force is effectively wasted because there's no matrix to which you can multiply it by. You see what I'm saying?
And I will go a step further with that, nameless protagonist. If you're expecting to gain power within the ADOS realm, that's where you're going to run into roadblocks because there is no power for men with the Y chromosome. But when you able to venture into other cultures
There it
and
is.
take their practices and develop within that same culture, i.e., being respectful, understanding the languages, developing as far as your place within that particular culture, then you can move with power because now you've been recognized by those other cultures. You are worthy of being a practitioner.
That's
So
so,
That
that's the
right there.
differences come.
that's
That
so
right
funny because
there.
I'm already doing that. I think
Yeah,
I think I'm more instinctually driven to do that than, or maybe well, I can't say instinctually. I can't say that.
that's why we got so many sellouts.
I learned from the space, and then instinctually from the learning that I had, I kind of already just put the two together. I guess.
Well, I think it's natural for us to do that. I mean, we jokingly call it tokenism, but when I look at our place in the world conversation, down to the story of Yasuke, that's my next video. That's my
Mhm.
next video. I'm finna
I
break that
really want to get
whole.
that. That's an interesting story, though.
I'm finna break
And
that whole
then once I got
concept
some
down.
stuff I gotta do, but I'll catch you later, man.
Absolutely, fam. Thanks for coming up, AB man. And
Thank you for coming up,
Hey,
man.
not a
Appreciate
problem,
it.
bro.
Mm.
Oos.
os.
Os.
Us.
But yeah, the whole scene around being recognized internationally for our capability, I think is a very important understanding. And I talked a little bit about this last night. You know, because we've had to do so much, it's why I make the statement before about how in the adosocial complex, there's no such thing as alpha and beta men. There are only sigmas and omegas. And it's because there is no structure under which the alpha and the beta can even function for. We have been in a forced position to have to augment ourselves to other spheres of power, dynamically ones that don't necessarily have our interest in mind. And it's because we've literally been cultivated to either be lone wolves or these lone inventors and inspirers that are left to the outskirts, that when we finally get an opportunity to be truly seen as human, when we truly get that chance to be within a circle or a sphere, the amount of work and value we can contribute is exponentially noticed and profound. And people immediately jump at you with regards to that. There's people I
Oh,
know
so
right
that's
now
what
that are
that
working
is.
abroad. Yeah, I mean, people I know now that are working abroad. The
I
fact
understand
that
that.
their work ethic and what they can produce is known, it shocks people back home from the United States when they see how valued other people place them. Because wherever you go in this environment within the American mythos, there is no cultural plugin for there to be a ADOS man, but there's a ADOS male plugin and there's an ADOS boy plugin, but not one for a man. And as a result, there's no modality for you to actually even exercise the authority required of a man. So when you finally get acknowledged as one in any sphere you get into, the amount of power you can command because you are so forceful is instantly noticed. And it's almost a meme with us. Sigma can tell you, man, people notice you on an intrinsic level. It's a different energy when people actually see you, like see you. You are an individual who's black, who or an individual that's American who happens to be black, rather than the other way around. And there's a completely different way you're received with regards to that and what you can get done.
No, no. I understand. Just when I speak to like quote unquote other Africans, and when I don't want to say it like this. I don't want to say it and sound conceited or anything. But when I generally go into a group of Africans and we start talking to each other and whatnot, depending on the topic or the conversation, or I either somehow I always end up being in a somewhat leader position, or somewhat, or they keep always usually ask me for more information, and I'm like always the one. Oh, I got information on this and different, and in these variety of different areas. So I kind of can understand that necessarily. So I can see it even without necessarily seeing it. I see what you mean. Okay.
Nameless Protagonist is something that you mentioned, Yasuke.
Hmm?
When when I talk to some of like the Japanese martial artists, those who come from a samurai family and everything. And I asked them as far as their interpretation of Yasuke. I've yet to find one person, Japanese in that regard, who has a negative connotation about Yasuke. And who knows, maybe I've yet to run into them, but in regards to majority of the samurai clans that are still around to this day, they put Yasuke in like a deity form. And that, to me, that's amazing. Here it is, you have a culture that is 98% Japanese. Very few other races or ethnicities have been around in this culture for a long time. But yet and still, you have a man in Yasuke who essentially went from a slave to a samurai that
Not just
in
any
the mind,
samurai either that he
yeah,
served. He served
right.
Oda Nobu freaking Naga.
Yes, one of the men who have united Japan in the first place. All the clans together. So when you think of that aspect and you think of the fact that they put him in this form of a deity, how much of a legend he is. That's why I tell a lot of black men who are interested in the forms of martial arts and really using that as means of improving their lifestyle. You literally have an opportunity to trailblaze a legend within your own rights. There was a guy I interviewed months back. Is a brother from the Cameroons, and this man, he's almost like a celebrity in Japan. Like when people see him, they call him the Kokujin Samurai, and so that shows right then and there for Adolf's type of men who are still trying to figure themselves out.
Oh, so
You need
people
to.
don't, in case people don't know, explain them what Kokujin
So
says.
Please.
Kokujin in Japanese means black,
Right.
and so his nickname in Japan is the Kokujin Samurai. So in other words, black samurai or black warrior.
Right.
And so what I really want to say to the guys that are listening in, you have to remove yourself from the matrix. And if the environment is not cultivating you for your maximum potential, then it's not you that's at fault. It's the environment. And you need to learn how to remove yourself, go to other environments that will help cultivate your potential, and you'll see exactly why somebody like Yasuke is literally considered a god in the samurai clans in Japan.
That's not even an exaggeration. I think his story really reflects kind of archetypically what we experience in the Edo social complex in general. I think most of us got to where we are, found our way to this space, and navigate the way we do off of stories that very much so mirror what he went through. And I think it serves as a good model to really speak about the whole concept, especially the concepts you guys are kind of embodying when you speak about the idea of the Black Ronin. You know, there is a whole self-initiation process that has to go down. It's why I break down the Dokudo so much, Musashi's way of walking alone, because that's our experience for the most part. We don't get to have a circle of, not most of us, very few of us do. We don't get to have circles of men that are there that have your best interest in mind, that initiate you to their sphere to see you succeed so that the group can become stronger. It's
Right.
more like you're in this perpetual state of debt. Which again, reminds you of the plantation, because everybody has a loan on themselves. That's what they're working to pay off, right? Technically pay off. That you're in this perpetual state of trying to pay off something that, you owe just because you were born.
Yeah. I let that shit go real early.
Yeah, I mean, it's internalized. And I think it's important to know that that's not normal. It's normalized, but that's not normal. That's not how human beings are supposed to really live.
To me, but before I jump off, but to me, when you can look at there's one thing I try to tell folks that the United States, compared to other countries, is just a baby. It's not even 300 years old yet. But
I thought it was
when you,
500.
it's not even 500.
Oh, okay, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. The United States of America, last time I checked, is only 252 years old. So, in the eyes of most countries around the world, it's considered a baby. But even then, when you can go no matter what, you can go to Africa, you can go to Europe, you could go to Asia, you can go to Australia, you can go to South America. And when you visit these places and you see, despite whatever economic background, no matter what educational background, all the sorts, when you see that from a child to manhood, they cultivate their men into whatever path that these little boys have chosen in their life, that shows you right then and there. There's definitely something unusual about a culture that doesn't cultivate their boys to become the men they're supposed to be.
Well, it's a crippling process, though. You can't have slaves without black women helping. So, the
That's
crippling
true.
process.
That's true. Well, good sirs, I have to jump off because I do have a stream later on tonight. But Neighbors Spectaculars, thank you so much for inviting me on. And I definitely will try to get back with you on the back end to definitely try to get that interview scheduled because
Yeah,
we
man.
definitely have a lot to talk about.
So my days off have changed. I'm off Friday, Saturday now. So let me know what works for you, man. And I'm game. You got my mail. Just hit me up anytime, man.
Yes, sir. Well,
All right,
you
man.
both have a great night and we'll see you on.
All right.
I've got to say, I think I really enjoyed running into you because I think you have a similar mindset to myself, which is rare, quite rare actually. So I actually
It's
enjoyed
more
talking.
common than you think, fam. It's just I don't think we've had an opportunity to openly be able to talk without being ridiculed for a lot of the number one, our anecdotal experiences, and number two, the conclusions that we've drawn from them. I think when you act outside of the hive model that's expected, if you're not functioning and preparing yourself to be a sacrifice, either economically or to be a vitamin D dispenser, it's a problem. You know,
Yeah,
it's a
basically.
problem.
Yeah.
But let me give a shout out real quick. I got a cash app from Donald Carroll, man. Salute to that. I appreciate the contribution, man. It definitely helps. He sent that a little bit ago. I didn't get the notification, but hopefully pretty soon I'll keep getting some of these streams out and some more pre-made, pre-recorded content. So
Yeah, I think actually I may actually do some content myself, and I actually think I like to speak to you more often, though. Yeah.
yeah, my contact information's in the profile, man. So just hit me up whenever, man. My DMs are open. I'm on Instagram at the Nameless Path. I'm gonna be going over more of the fitness tip on a lot of these levels. Um, I really want to cover that, man. There's a lot that I've been discovering with my lifestyle, what I do with my fitness, what I do with not just my eating habits on being vegan, but what I've learned and studied from analyzing our history here and taking advantage of a lot of the new information that's coming out from the biological sphere, especially as it pertains to the gut biome and mental health. I'm learning so much, and having seen it affect me, I want to share it with everybody else because I think everyone can find something that they can use and add as a habit to help improve their own situation. Because I think to get clarity of mind and body is a lifestyle process, and you've got to learn how to de-industrialize, or rather have the industrialization work in your favor to improve your overall health. And I think that's something that we can do, and it's accessible. We just kind of got to educate ourselves on it, man. Because if we've got our mind and our physicality right, it's a lot easier to deal with the non-physical challenges that show up in life. And we'll have the energy available to start making better change for ourselves, which will trickle down and create better change for everybody else around us, man. Because again, I think that's ultimately what we want to do, is to be able to create value for people around us, man. Because it circles back to you one way or another.
You know what? That's actually what I've been trying to create. Just out of my own mindset, that's what I've been trying to create. When I go to different dudes, I'll be like, "Hey, man, you might want to go link up and do this, and you may want to come to get to looking and do this." And I even talked to one dude. I was like, "Hey, you need to start looking at every man you talk to and build a network. Look at the man like a whale. If you go to every individual, you can draw from that well. That means that's more water that you can necessarily be able to gain necessarily." And when I was telling the guy, he was looking at me as if I was like crazy, and I was like, "No, I mean the concept of you have a well that you can draw knowledge from necessarily. That's the good thing. And if you got a multiple wells, that means you can also increase your knowledge base and vice versa. So the more wells that you have, the more ability you be able to gain." And I'm talking to these guys, and they're looking at me like as if I'm talking something mystical almost, and I'm like, y'all ain't gonna get it. Never mind. But at the same time, I'm seeing dudes respond to me, and some dudes actually kind of reach out to me. But at the same time, it was odd that I was necessarily doing that. But all right.
I think it's just a natural part of, who we are as a people overall, man. It's just that people like cherry picking the role for us to fit in. We don't get, just like, Sigma Jones was talking about earlier, man. You've got your classes that are assigned to you, and if you don't fit that mold, it's a problem. And many of us don't have any sort of cultural guidance to know how to operate outside of that. And so most of us that do end up doing so, it's because we've been kicked out of the circle in the first place, or we've just got so much force of will that we're just going to do it anyway. And people have learned to adjust to us. But it's an exception and not the rule. Yeah, I mean, those are the past, man.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. I kind of already was on that. I was basically forcing my will there, and I was kind of already being kicked. So I was kind of like, I want to leave, and she was kicking. So I was like, hey, we on the same mindset. So okay.
But with that, fam, I guess we'll go ahead and start to conclude, man. If you had any other questions, man, definitely feel free to drop them. If there's anybody else in the chat.
No, not actually. I think I learned a lot. I'm probably gonna go back over some of your information on your other shows and whatnot, and actually go over that information when I get the opportunity and time. So yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, if you have any questions, man, drop an email, send me a message on IG. That's where I'm usually most active on. And
Okay.
yeah, hopefully I'll see you guys next week, man. We'll chop it up, maybe get started on Sword Form 5, I guess it would be. We'll see. We can do that or talk about a little bit about Yasuke and that
Definitely. That can be a
discovery.
Interesting story to go over, man. Appreciate it, man. Nameless protagonist.
Last Zulu, it's been a pleasure. Os. But with that, man, I definitely appreciate you guys coming here to participate. Definitely, if you can, leave a like before you leave. Feel free to share. Definitely catch the playback. It's always a pleasure to be of service to you guys. And anytime you guys have any topic requests or anything, just send me a message and I got you. But in the meantime, you all be safe. To the dojo. Os. To the folks in the sphere. Os. This has been the Nameless Protagonist. Enjoy the rest of your day.